The man who walked into a bar and was never seen again the disappearance of Brian Shaffer on the night of April 1st, 2006. Thousands of people filled the bars around the South Campus Gateway District in Columbus, Ohio. It was the weekend. Music poured onto the sidewalks. College students laughed as they moved from one bar to another. For most people, it was just another Saturday night, but before the sun came up, one young medical student would disappear under circumstances that investigators still cannot fully explain. His name was Brian Shaffer. Security cameras recorded him walking into a crowded bar shortly before closing time. Hours later, police carefully reviewed the surveillance footage. They expected to see Brian leave. Instead, they discovered something impossible. Despite reviewing hours of video, investigators could not identify Brian leaving the bar through the main entrance, where the cameras were recording. Nearly 20 years later, his disappearance remains one of America's most puzzling missing person cases. What happened to Brian Shaffer? Did he leave through an exit? No one noticed. Did he choose to disappear? Or did something happen after the cameras lost sight of him? This is the story of one ordinary night that turned into an extraordinary mystery. Brian Randall Shaffer was 27 years old. He lived in Columbus, Ohio, where he attended medical school at the Ohio State University. Friends described him as intelligent, outgoing, and easy to talk to. He enjoyed music. He loved spending time with friends, and he was only months away from beginning the next chapter of his medical career. But behind that promising future, Brian had recently experienced a devastating loss. Only weeks earlier, his mother had passed away after battling cancer. Those closest to Brian said her death affected him deeply. Like many people dealing with grief, he tried to keep moving forward. Friends later recalled that he still made plans for the future. He talked about traveling. He looked forward to graduation. He even discussed taking a vacation before beginning his medical residency. Nothing suggested he intended to disappear. As March came to an end, Brian decided to spend Saturday night with friends. It was supposed to be a chance to relax, just another evening, before an upcoming family vacation. No Juanima. It would be the last confirmed time anyone would see him. That evening, Brian first met with his father for dinner. According to reports, the meal was uneventful. They talked normally. There was no argument, no indication that anything unusual was about to happen. Later, Brian joined his friend William Clint Florence. The two visited several bars around Columbus. Eventually, they arrived at one of the city's busiest nightlife locations, a bar called Ugly Tuna Saloona. Located inside the South Campus Gateway complex, the bar attracted large crowds every weekend. Hundreds of people passed through its entrance. Each night. Music echoed through the building. The atmosphere was loud, busy, chaotic. Exactly the kind of environment where small details could easily go unnoticed. As the night continued, Brian appeared relaxed. Witnesses later told investigators that he laughed, talked with friends, and behaved normally. Nothing about his actions suggested fear, panic, or distress. At one point, surveillance cameras outside the entrance captured Brian speaking with two young women. The conversation lasted only a short time. The women later cooperated fully with investigators and were never considered suspects. It would become one of the final confirmed recordings of Brian alive. No one realized that history was quietly being recorded. Just before 2 o'clock in the morning, surveillance cameras captured what would become one of the most analyzed moments in modern missing person history. Brian Shaffer was standing outside the entrance of the Ugly Tuna Saloona, talking with two young women. The conversation appeared casual. Nothing in the footage suggested panic or distress. After a brief exchange, the women walked away. Brian then turned back toward the bar and disappeared from the camera's view. That is the last confirmed image of him ever recorded. Inside the bar, it was the final minutes before closing. Music was still playing. Customers were finishing their drinks. Employees were preparing to close for the night. Outside, Brian's friends eventually realized they could not find him. They called his phone several times. There was no answer, believing he had simply left on his own and gone home. They eventually stopped searching and left the area. At the time, nothing seemed especially unusual. Friends sometimes become separated after a night of bar, and Brian had always been independent. The following morning, however, things began to change. Brian failed to contact his girlfriend. Alexis Wagoner, the two, had been planning a vacation to Miami for spring break. When Brian missed his scheduled flight, people close to him immediately knew something was wrong. According to family and friends, missing a trip he had been looking forward to is completely out of character. Soon afterward, Brian was officially reported missing. Police began retracing every known step from the previous night. Investigators interviewed friends, family members, bar employees, and anyone who might have crossed paths with him. The first major breakthrough came from the surveillance. Cameras installed around the South Campus Gateway complex. The footage clearly showed Brian arriving at the building with his friends around 1:15 a.m. Later, at approximately 1:55 a.m., cameras recorded him outside the bar talking with two women. Those women were eventually identified and interviewed. Investigators found nothing to indicate they were involved in Brian's disappearance. Then investigators noticed something that made the case famous, despite reviewing the available surveillance footage over and over again. They could not identify Brian leaving through the main entrance captured by the cameras. It appeared as though he had simply vanished. News of that discovery spread quickly. Headlines described it as the man who walked into a bar and never walked out. But detectives cautioned against assuming the cameras captured every possible route. The building included a service exit connected to a construction area. While it was not intended for regular customers, investigators acknowledged that it was physically possible someone could have left that way. Camera coverage around that area was not perfect, meaning there were potential blind spots. Police carefully considered several possibilities. Could Brian have slipped out through the service area? Could he have avoided the cameras by accident? Could the surveillance system simply have missed him? Experienced investigators know that security footage is rarely perfect. A camera only records what falls within its field of view. Even a few seconds outside that view can completely change an investigation. To answer those questions, detectives expanded the search. They reviewed surveillance footage from nearby businesses. They searched dumpsters. They checked nearby streets. Police dogs searched surrounding areas. Investigators even searched sections of the city's sewer system. Nothing connected directly to Brian was found. Meanwhile, detectives examined Brian's apartment. His car was still parked outside. Inside, everything appeared normal. There were no obvious signs of a struggle. Nothing suggested he had packed his belongings or prepared to disappear voluntarily. As days turned into weeks, one question became more important than any other. If Brian had left the bar, what happened next? As investigators continued searching for answers, the case attracted national attention. Every new clue was examined. Every rumor was investigated. Every possible lead was followed. But with each passing week, the mystery only became deeper. One of the first things detectives analyzed was Brian's cell phone. Like many missing person investigations, they hoped his phone would reveal where he had gone after leaving the bar. At first, there was very little to work with. Then, several months after Brian disappeared, something unexpected happened. Brian's cell phone briefly connected to a cellular network. The signal lasted only a short time before disappearing again. For Brian's family, it was a moment of hope. Could he still be alive? Could someone else have turned on his phone? Or was it simply a technical error? Investigators could never determine exactly why the signal appeared. Cellular experts have pointed out that brief network connections can sometimes occur for technical reasons, and the signal alone was never considered proof that Brian or even his phone was actively being used. Unfortunately, the brief connection did not provide investigators with enough information to locate the phone. The mystery remained. Detectives then focused on the people who had spent the evening with Brian. His friends fully cooperated with the investigator. They explained everything they could remember about that night. Their time were compared with surveillance footage. Investigators looked for inconsistencies. As part of the investigation, Brian's friend, William Clinged, Florence agreed to take a polygraph examination. Reports indicate that he passed the test. While polygraph results are not considered reliable enough to prove guilt or innocence in court, detectives found no evidence linking him to Brian's disappearance. Brian's girlfriend, Alexis Wagoner, was also interviewed. She had been expecting to leave for a vacation with Brian just days after he disappeared. Friends described their relationship as stable. Investigators found no evidence suggesting she was involved. Attention then turned to the employees working at the Ugly Tuna Saloona that night. Bartenders. Security. Staff. Managers. Every employee was questioned. No one reported seeing anything unusual involving Brian. No witness came forward claiming to have seen him leave through a hidden exit. No employee reported an argument. No fight was connected to him. Nothing explained how he vanished. As months became years, investigators considered several possible explanations. The first theory was the simplest. Perhaps Brian left through the service exit connected to the construction area. Supporters of this theory argue that surveillance cameras did not cover every possible angle. If Brian exited through an area outside the camera's field of view, it would explain why he never appeared leaving on video. If that happened, something unrelated to the bar could have occurred afterward. An accident, a random act of violence, or an encounter with someone he met after leaving. However, despite extensive searches, investigators found no physical evidence supporting this scenario. Another theory suggested Brian intentionally disappeared. Those who support this idea often point to the enormous emotional stress he had experienced after losing his mother. Some speculate that grief may have influenced his decision to start a new life somewhere else. But detectives have repeatedly noted that there has never been solid evidence proving Brian planned to disappear. He left behind his car, his belongings, his medical education, family, his friends, and the future career he had worked years to achieve. Walking away from all of that without leaving a trace would have required extraordinary planning. No financial activity consistent with building a new life has ever been publicly confirmed. Another theory focuses on foul play. Could Brian have encountered someone after leaving the bar? Police have never ruled that possibility out. Large entertainment districts can become chaotic after closing time. Thousands of people leave within minutes. If Brian left through an area not covered by cameras, investigators acknowledge that something could have happened afterward. But without witnesses or physical evidence, that possibility remains only a theory. Over the years, many internet rumors have circulated. Some claim Brian was secretly living under another identity. Others suggested organized crime. Some even proposed elaborate conspiracies. Investigators have never publicly supported those claims. In long-running missing person cases, speculation often grows as the absence of answer leaves room for imagination. But experienced detectives continue to separate verified evidence from rumor. And in Brian's case, verified evidence has always been remarkably limited. That is one reason this investigation remains so frustrating. There is no confirmed crime scene. No confirmed suspect. No confirmed sighting after the bar. And no confirmed explanation. Only questions. Questions that have remained unanswered for nearly 2 decades. Nearly 20 years have passed since Brian Shaffer disappeared. In that time, technology has advanced dramatically. Surveillance systems have improved. Digital forensics has become more sophisticated. Investigators have solved countless cold cases using DNA, new interviews, and modern investigative techniques. But Brian's case remains one of the most frustrating unsolved disappearances in the United States. His family has spent years searching for answers. Investigators have followed countless leads. Search teams have examined locations throughout central Ohio. Tips have come from across the country. Yet, none have provided a definitive answer. One of the reasons this case continues to fascinate investigators is because it challenges a basic expectation. When someone enters a public place filled with people and security cameras, we assume their movements can be reconstructed. We expect there to be a clear timeline, a beginning, a middle, an end. But Brian's timeline simply stops. Investigators know when he entered the South Campus Gateway complex. They know he spent time inside the Ugly Tuna Saloona. They know he was recorded speaking with 2 women shortly before closing time. After that, certainty disappears. Everything that follows is based on possibilities rather than confirmed facts. That uncertainty is exactly what has kept this case alive for so many years. Every few months, someone claims to have solved the mystery. A new theory appears online. A new video goes viral. A new discussion begins. But when detectives compare those theories to the available evidence, the same problem remains. There is simply not enough verified information to reach a conclusion. Cold case. Investigators often say that the smallest detail can solve the biggest mystery. A forgotten witness. An overlooked photograph. A new forensic technique. Or a single phone call. Cases that remain unsolved for decades are sometimes broken open by one tiny piece of information that seemed unimportant at the time. That is why investigators continue encouraging anyone with credible information to come forward, even after all these years. One unanswered question continues to stand above all the others. Did Brian actually leave the bar without being captured on the available cameras? Or did investigators miss something far more important? That question has shaped every theory surrounding this case. If he left unnoticed, then the mystery may have begun somewhere outside the building. If he never truly left the area in the way investigators expected, then the answer could still be connected to the events of that night. Without new evidence, no one can say for certain. The disappearance of Brian Shaffer reminds us that real mysteries are rarely as simple as they appear. Unlike movies, real investigations do not always have dramatic endings. Sometimes there is no confession, no final clue, no moment where every question is answered. Sometimes families wait years for news that never comes. Sometimes investigators must accept that the truth exists, even if it has not yet been discovered. Brian was more than a headline. He was a son, friend, a medical student with plans for the future. People who knew him remember him as intelligent, kind, and full of potential. His disappearance left behind not only unanswered questions, but also people who have spent years wondering what really happened. Today, the case remains officially unsolved. Investigators have not announced any confirmed evidence proving that Brian is alive. They have also not found evidence explaining exactly how he disappeared. The file remains open. Search for answers continues. And one ordinary Saturday night in 2006 continues to puzzle investigators almost 2 decades later. If you have followed this case before, what theory do you think best fits the known evidence? Do you believe Brian left the bar through an exit not fully covered by surveillance? Do you think he met with foul play afterward? Or do you think there is another explanation investigators have not yet uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy carefully researched true crime documentaries based on real cases, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next case.